Courtrooms are meant to be places of justice, truth, and resolution, but sometimes they become the backdrop for shocking and heartbreaking tragedies. Whether it's a sudden collapse, a vengeful act, or a moment of unbearable emotion, these rare but unforgettable incidents leave behind a haunting silence that echoes far beyond the walls of the courtroom. In this video, we're diving into 5 of the most tragic courtroom deaths of all time.
From Castleton set out the team of rescuers on their last bid to save Neil Moss. The young man was trapped far in Peak Cavern, a mile and a half from the entrance, 1,000 feet underground.
On March 22, 1959, 20-year-old Oxford student Neil Moss stepped into the ancient darkness of Peak Cavern in Derbyshire, England, unaware that he was walking into the pages of a tragedy that would haunt the caving world forever. Neil, a philosophy undergraduate at Balliol College, wasn't a reckless thrill-seeker. He was bright, composed, and fascinated by the subterranean world that stretched silently beneath Castleton's rolling hills. That day, he joined a small group of fellow cavers and ventured beyond the well-lit tourist paths, far past the comfort of daylight, almost a mile into the earth. Their goal, to explore an unexplored vertical shaft deep within the cavern system. Neil volunteered to go first. The shaft was narrow and unknown, but he pressed on, descending deeper in search of untouched passageways. Then something went horribly wrong. He became wedged, tight, 1,000 feet from the surface, trapped in a shaft that narrowed cruelly around him. The ladder above him had become blocked, likely by a dislodged rock, and the space was too tight for him to move. Panic set in. The rock pressed into his shoulders, his chest, his limbs, unyielding, suffocating. When word of his entrapment reached the surface, a massive rescue effort launched. What followed would become the most intense cave rescue mission England had ever seen. More than 200 people gathered, trained cavers, rescuers, villagers, many who had never been underground before. At first they tried ropes. Again and again they pulled, but the ropes kept snapping under the strain. The shaft was too slick, too cramped. Then came the hard decisions. In a desperate effort to free him, rescuers attempted to break his collarbones, hoping to reduce his body's width enough to wriggle him free. But even that wasn't enough. Time was running out, and worse, Neil was running out of air. Down in the shaft, he was breathing his own exhaled carbon dioxide, a deadly buildup in a space with no airflow. He began to lose consciousness. Each failed rescue attempt took a little more hope from those above. Then came June Bailey. Just 18, tiny and fearless, she volunteered to go down. She fit where others couldn't, and stayed underground with Neil for 6 long hours, whispering encouragement and trying everything she could. But eventually she too was forced back, driven away by the choking, foul air filling the shaft. Others followed, including caving veteran Bob Leakey, but the rock refused to let Neil go. By the morning of March 24th, more than 35 hours after he'd first gone in, Neil Moss was gone. His father had waited at the cave entrance throughout the ordeal. He'd heard every update, every failed attempt, every scream of rope and clatter of gear as rescue workers fought the earth itself. And when the worst news came, he made a quiet, agonizing decision. No more lives would be risked. Neil's body would remain where it was. A place meant for discovery had become a grave.
On the 2nd of April, 1993, Ellie Nesler took the law into her own hands in a Northern California courtroom by shooting to death Daniel Driver in the head and neck 5 times.
It was supposed to be just another court hearing, cold, procedural, maybe even forgettable. But on April 2nd, 1993, inside a quiet California courtroom in the town of Jamestown, everything changed in the blink of an eye. What happened that day wouldn't just make headlines, it would ignite a national firestorm. Ellie Nesler sat silently as the man accused of molesting her 6-year-old son entered the courtroom. His name was Daniel Mark Driver, and this wasn't his first time being accused. In fact, he had a history, convicted before for preying on children. Now he stood accused of molesting not just 1, but 5 boys. One of them was hers. Ellie had watched her son William struggle to understand what had been done to him. She'd seen the damage, the nightmares, the silence, and sitting there in that courtroom watching the man who had shattered her child's innocence, something inside her snapped. During a break in the proceedings, Ellie Nesler stood up, pulled out a revolver, and fired 5 shots directly into Driver's head. He dropped instantly. No chance to run, no plea, no more questions, just silence. The courtroom erupted in chaos, screams, gasps, and scrambling deputies. But Ellie didn't flee. She didn't try to hide. She had done what she came to do, and in that moment, she believed it was justice. News of the shooting spread like wildfire. Some called her a hero, a mother pushed too far, acting when the system seemed to stall. Others called it vigilantism, plain and simple, a dangerous message that justice could come from the barrel of a gun. But Ellie's story wasn't simple. It never was. In the beginning, public sympathy leaned in her favor, a mother protecting her child, a woman confronting a predator. But the cracks soon began to show. It was revealed she had methamphetamine in her system at the time of the shooting. That image of righteous fury, it began to unravel. She was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, a 10-year sentence. But then that too was challenged. Her conviction was overturned due to jury misconduct. She took a plea deal, served just 3 years, and walked free. But freedom didn't bring peace. In the years that followed, Ellie's life spiraled further into the grip of addiction and legal trouble. In 2002, she was arrested again, this time for selling and possessing meth. She claimed the justice system in her county was rigged against her, but the sentence stuck. She served more time behind bars and was released in 2006. By then, the name Ellie Nessler had faded from the national spotlight, but her story would resurface, this time in an even darker twist. In 2005, her son William, the same boy she had once risked everything to protect, was convicted of murder. He had stomped a man to death, a worker on the family's rural property. The cycle of violence had come full circle. Ellie Nessler died of breast cancer in 2008 at age 56, nearly forgotten by the media that once swarmed her story. But for many, she remains a haunting symbol of what happens when justice feels out of reach, when grief and rage eclipse law, and one tragic moment defines a life. What she did sparked a nationwide debate. Was it justice? Was it madness? Or was it something in between? A broken mother, facing a broken system, doing what she believed no one else would. There are no easy answers, only the echo of gunshots in a courtroom and the memory of a woman who pulled the trigger.
Triple murder suspect Robert Seaman jumps to his death inside the Mahoning County Courthouse. His body brought out of the rotunda just about an hour ago. Workers.
It was a quiet Monday morning at the Mahoning County Courthouse, until it wasn't. Robert Seaman, 48 years old, walked calmly alongside 2 deputies. No handcuffs, no visible resistance, just another routine escort to a courtroom on the 4th floor. But what happened next sent a wave of shock and horror through everyone in the building, and left a stain on the marble rotunda below that no one will ever forget. Seaman wasn't just any defendant. He was facing trial for one of the most horrifying crimes in recent Ohio memory, the arson murder of a 10-year-old girl, Corinne Gump, and her grandparents, Bill and Judy Schmidt. Prosecutors believed Seaman set their home on fire deliberately because Corinne was set to testify that he had raped her, a child burned alive to silence her forever. The charges were so heinous that if convicted, Seaman would likely face the death penalty. And the evidence? It was overwhelming. The fire was ruled arson. Corinne and her grandparents were found in the charred remains of their home. Investigators uncovered damning connections, motives, timelines, testimony. Assistant Prosecutor Dawn Cantalamessa said plainly, he knew the evidence against him. Every witness we spoke to wondered why he hadn't taken a plea. Maybe now we know why. As Seaman approached the courtroom for a final status hearing before the trial, he suddenly slowed his pace. The deputies continued walking, but Seaman paused for only a split second. Then, in a flash of horrifying clarity, he bolted toward the railing, 4 floors up. No hesitation, no scuffle, no warning, and then he jumped. The marble rotunda below echoed with the sickening finality of a body hitting stone. Chaos erupted. The courthouse locked down. Ropes were placed around his lifeless body until paramedics arrived. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Security footage later confirmed it all. A quick dash, a deliberate leap, an apparent suicide right there in the heart of the very courthouse where justice was about to unfold. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an impulsive stumble. It was a final, calculated escape. Sheriff Jerry Green watched the footage himself. There was no scuffle or anything, he said, shaking his head. He just went, and just like that, Robert Seaman was gone. No trial, no verdict, no chance for the families of Corinne, Bill, and Judy to confront him in court. No justice, only a sudden, hollow silence. Seaman's attorney, Tom Zena, said he was stunned. His client had always claimed innocence. Just days before, Seaman had calmly asked when he'd be transported for the trial. "We'll see you there on the 12th, Zena had told him. No one imagined those would be the last words spoken to him, but prosecutors weren't surprised. In fact, to them, Seaman's jump spoke volumes. "It's very telling," Cantalamessa repeated. He knew what was coming. Robert Seaman took the one escape route he still had control over. And in doing so, he denied everyone else the one thing they had left, the truth spoken out loud in court, in front of a jury. He didn't just fall that day. He fled from accountability, from a trial he knew he couldn't win, from the eyes of a little girl who never got the chance to speak. Some called it justice denied. Others saw it as a confession written in bone and blood. But one thing was certain. The echoes of Robert Semon's final act will haunt that courthouse forever.
When 6 men entered a tight cave system to help out with some important mapping work, they thought they would be in for an adventurous day in the deep tunnels of Mossdale Caves. The harsh reality of what they would face is absolutely stunning.
It was midsummer in Yorkshire, 1967/deep beneath the moors. 10 young men stepped into the infamous Mossdale Caverns, Britain's most brutal cave system. They were driven not by fame or money, but by obsession, by the lure of discovery in a place so remote, so rarely seen, that more people had walked on the moon than reached its furthest points. Hours passed underground. The group split, as they often did. 4 turned back after a few hours, sensing enough was enough, but 6 kept going, pushing deeper, wriggling through the jagged marathon crawls, braving passages so tight you couldn't lift your head, where the only way forward was sideways in a stream. They laughed, they teased each other. There was talk of new chambers, new records, the thrill of the unknown just beyond the next bend. They were young, one just a teenager, the oldest barely 26, and believed they could beat the cave. After all, they had before. Then came the sound, a deep, sickening rumble, faint at first, then unmistakable, the kind of noise that steals the air from your lungs. Someone made a joke. Is that the stream going up? But no one laughed. Above them on the surface, a cloudburst had exploded without warning. Rain poured across the moorland, swelling the waters of Mossdale Beck, a stream that disappeared directly into the mouth of the cave. The entrance was now a funnel, and all that water was rushing down, fast. Inside, the 6 cavers were already too far in. Over 3 kilometers from daylight, they had nowhere to go. The crawlways began to fill. The water crept up their bodies inch by inch. There was no standing, no room to run, just narrow tunnels, low ceilings, and the roar of water drowning out every desperate breath. They crawled faster, hearts pounding, but they knew this was the nightmare, every caver's silent fear. The flood, the cave closing in. The realization that no skill, no experience, no strength could save them now. On the surface, Morag Forbes, one of the 4 who had exited early, ran back to check the entrance. She found it submerged, sealed shut by the rising stream. Panic surged. She turned and sprinted across 4 kilometers of harsh moorland to raise the alarm. Help arrived swiftly, but nature had other plans. Rescue crews couldn't even enter. The water was too high, too savage. They dug trenches, redirected streams, prayed for the rain to stop. But time dragged on. It wasn't until the following day that rescuers could finally squeeze into the flooded cave. The mood was grim. They found 5 bodies deep inside, crumpled in the far marathon crawls, the same winding tunnels the boys had once passed through with laughter. A final search party led by the legendary Bob Leakey, the cave's original explorer, hoped the 6th man might have found higher ground. But hope, like oxygen, was running out. The last body was found the next day. There was no recovery. The risk was too great. The coroner made the painful call. The cave would be sealed, not with ceremony, but with concrete. The dead would remain beneath the earth, buried where they fell, in the cold grip of the cave they had tried to conquer. The disaster sent shockwaves through the British caving community. It was the worst of its kind. The Mossdale Caverns, with their unpredictable waters and cruel terrain, claimed 6 lives in minutes. And yet, even now, their story echoes through the limestone. A plaque above the entrance stands as a silent tribute. On the moor, a solitary cairn marks the ground above their tomb. It reads simply, "Over the place in the cave where the bodies were found." This was no ordinary trial. Inside a Dayton, Ohio courtroom, Kyson Wilkins was turning the justice system into chaotic theater. He wasn't just another defendant, he was on trial for attempted murder, charged with felonious assault, firing into a home, and illegal weapons possession. But what made this case unforgettable wasn't the crime, it was what unfolded inside that courtroom. Wilkins made a bold decision. He would represent himself. No lawyer, no filter, just him against the system. And from the beginning, he treated the courtroom like a battleground. He accused the court of conspiring against him, claimed he was being lynched, disrupted proceedings so often that Judge Mary Catherine Huffman had to repeatedly warn him, At one point, he even shouted, "Just get a tree and bring it in here," insisting the court was staging a modern-day lynching. After 3 days of delays, the judge had had enough. "You've had months to prepare," she told him. But Wilkins wasn't finished. As he began cross-examining a witness, his chance to seize control, something strange happened. He stopped mid-sentence, clutched his chest, and collapsed. The courtroom froze. Was it real? A heart attack? Medics rushed in, but something was off. His breathing was normal, pulse steady. Deputies and a nurse examined him. Their verdict? He was faking it. Judge Huffman didn't blink. Wilkins slumped deeper in his chair, eyes glassy. A deputy brought out smelling salts. One sharp whiff, and Wilkins shot upright. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Wilkins, do you have any questions for this witness?" she asked. Silence. "I'll take that as a no." His collapse, it turned out, was just a desperate attempt to derail the trial. But it failed. Judge Huffman stripped him of his right to self-representation. Standby counsel took over. The trial went on. The charges were serious. Back in 2004, Wilkins had told his friend he was paid $10,000 to kill Reginald Brooks. The next day, Brooks was ambushed by someone with an assault rifle. Brooks shot back and identified Wilkins to 911. Wilkins later confessed to his friend, who saw him discard his bulletproof vest and clothes after the attack. Police recovered matching evidence. Wilkins ran, lied about his name, but it was too late. The case was airtight. At trial, Wilkins claimed unfair witness notices and argued his collapse had prejudiced the jury. But the court saw through it. Medical personnel confirmed nothing was wrong with him. His silence afterward was viewed as obstruction, not illness. The jury found him guilty of everything: assault, illegal discharge, possession while under disability, and being a repeat violent offender. 42 years in prison. No mistrial, no sympathy. In the end, the man who tried to turn the courtroom into a stage ended up behind bars, his final act falling flat before a judge who refused to play along. There's something eerie about the silence underwater, the way the world seems to vanish, replaced by shadows and weightlessness. For Peter Verhulsel, that silence would become unbearable. In 1984, what began as a routine cave dive with friends in South Africa's Sterkfontein Caves turned into one of the most agonizing survival stories imaginable. A slow, haunting death, hidden deep beneath one of the most ancient places on Earth. Peter was just 29, filled with curiosity and a thirst for discovery. He wasn't the most experienced diver in the group, but his adventurous spirit pushed him forward. He and his two companions were attempting to determine the depth of a submerged cave lake known as Milner Hall, a dark, unexplored pocket of the Earth where prehistoric fossils had been found and ancient secrets waited in still water. But beneath all that history, danger lurked. The plan was simple: follow the guideline across the dive route and surface together. But Peter kept drifting from the path. Fascinated by the cave's mysterious channels, he broke protocol once, then again. Both times his friends had to retrieve him, but the third time he vanished. He had let go of the guideline, wandered too far, and then realized he was lost. Panic sets in differently underwater. There's no screaming, no sprinting for help, only the deafening roar of your own breathing and the cold press of stone all around you. Peter swam blindly through the labyrinth of flooded tunnels, searching for any sign of escape or air. Somehow fate led him to a small, dry island, a rocky outcrop surrounded by water, isolated in pitch blackness. He was alive. He had air, but he was trapped. Peter waited. Hours turned into days. Somewhere above, people searched. Divers combed the submerged maze, unknowingly passing within 30 meters of him at one point, close enough to save him, yet worlds apart in the endless dark. He was alone, with nothing but his thoughts and the slow, cruel decay of starvation gnawing away at him. For 3 weeks, Peter clung to hope. He rationed his strength, probably listening for even the faintest splash or sound of movement. But the silence was endless. The darkness was absolute. There was no light to guide him out. Only the suffocating black of a world that had already swallowed him whole. And in that final stretch, when his body began to fail, Peter left behind a message. His last words, drawn with desperate fingers into the sand. "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." By the time they found him, 6 weeks and 1 day after he vanished, Peter's body was skeletal, curled near a sump pool, still surrounded by darkness. His remains were discovered by dry cavers who found long-forgotten tunnels, etched with faint footprints leading to the secluded island. An autopsy would later confirm what rescuers already feared. Peter hadn't drowned. He hadn't suffocated. He had starved to death alone, in silence. Today, the Sterkfontein Caves are a place of scientific wonder. Tourists walk boardwalks above the excavation sites where ancient human ancestors were found. Mrs. Pless and Littlefoot, two of the oldest known hominids, rest nearby in fossilized memory. But Peter Verhulsel's story haunts those caves in a different way. His death didn't happen millions of years ago. It was recent, real, raw, because even with the best gear, training, and plans, caves don't forgive curiosity. They don't echo your cries. They keep their secrets, and sometimes they keep you too.
February 6, 2014, 5 divers cut a triangular hole in the ice on a river in the Plurtland Valley of central Norway. This 35-meter-wide river rises abruptly out of the ground from a strange pond known by locals as Plura.
The icy silence of Plurtland Valley concealed a secret world beneath its frozen skin, a vast, black maze of water, stone, and bone-numbing cold. In February 2014, 5 Finnish divers, bonded by years of dangerous dives, cut a triangular hole into the thick ice covering the spring known as Plura. One by one, they slipped into the mouth of darkness, the cold water closing over them like a tomb. They were not thrill-seekers. They were explorers, brothers in spirit, if not in blood. Their goal was Steinugelflaget, a cave accessible only by an underwater path plunging more than 130 meters deep through jagged, freezing tunnels. It wasn't just a dive. It was one of the most dangerous in the world. A 5-hour journey through the Earth's lungs, breathless and unforgiving. Patrick Gronkvist and Jari Hotarinen led the way. For Jari, this would be his first full traverse. Behind them, 3 more followed after allowing sediment to settle, a standard practice. Each diver operated alone, but together. No commander, just mutual respect. For nearly an hour, they swam deeper, their scooters humming, torches casting eerie beams into blackness. Then something went wrong. When Gronkvist looked back, Hotarinen was gone. He retraced his path, heart pounding. In the narrowest part of the cave, he found him, tangled in a cord signaling distress. He was panicking, breathing too fast, CO2 poisoning. Gronkvist handed him a spare cylinder, but in switching mouthpieces, Jari swallowed water. He drowned, right there in front of his best friend. Gronkvist had to push forward. He had already spent 20 minutes at lethal depth. The decompression stops ahead would be brutal. He swam on, alone. Behind him, Vesa Rantanen arrived and froze. Jari's body blocked the tunnel. He had 2 options, retreat or push past his dead friend. He chose forward. It took 15 agonizing minutes to get through. His gas supply thinned. The delay added hours to his decompression. He surfaced early and paid for it with the bends. The last 2, Jari Usimaki and Kai Kankanen, were still behind. Usimaki panicked at the sight of the body. He lost control. CO2 poisoning claimed him too. Kankanen tried to help, but turned back. Disoriented and exhausted, he surfaced 11 hours after entering, smashing through newly frozen ice. 2 were dead. The survivors, Gronkvist, Rantanen, and Kankanen, were broken. The cave was sealed. Recovery was deemed impossible. But that wasn't the end. Gronkvist, a firefighter, promised Hotarinen's widow, "We'll bring them back." It was their code. No one gets left behind. They would return, in secret. No fanfare, no permission, just resolve. They trained, prepared. 50 gas cylinders, a floating decompression habitat. A 5-day mission planned with surgical precision. March 22, 2014. They returned to Plura. The water swallowed them again. Kankanen resurfaced. He couldn't do it. Gronkvist and Sami Pakarinen dove on. Their torches lit the shadows. Then, Usimaki, still silent. A few meters further, Hotarinen, right where he had fallen. Sami cut him free. Gronkvist latched him to a scooter and towed him up, through the flooded tomb to Steinugelflaget. Waiting. Rantanen. "I've thought about this every night since I left him here," Gronkvist said. 1 more remained. The next day, they went back for Usimaki. His body was bloated, unstable. A section of the cave collapsed on Sami, but they made it. Both were recovered. 2 body bags. A moment of silence. A brotherhood fulfilled, they informed the authorities. Technically, they had broken the law, but no charges came. In Finland, they were honored. A film diving into the unknown told their story. But this was not a hero's tale. It was grief, sacrifice, sisu, Finnish grit in the face of loss. Some, like British diver Rick Stanton, admired their effort but questioned the cost. "This shouldn't have happened," he said. But ask these men why they returned, and they won't offer cliches. Just truth. You don't leave a friend behind. And as the ice closed once more over Plura, the cave gave them back what it had taken. Not peace, but something like it.
No. Gut, in Zurück? Ja. Wieder zurück. Super.
It started like any other day in the small German town of Euskirchen. People came and went from the district courthouse, lawyers with folders, families with worry in their eyes, and judges settling yet another case. But by the time the sun had set on March 9, 1994, 7 people were dead, dozens were scarred for life, and a courtroom had become a war zone. His name was Erwin Mikolajczyk, a 39-year-old hospital maintenance worker, quiet, a loner, a man who kept to himself. But behind that ordinary exterior, something dark had been growing, something explosive. That day, he had just lost his appeal. A judge had upheld his conviction for violently beating his 56-year-old ex-girlfriend, Vera Lamasic, a $4,000 fine, an official stain on his name. But to Mikolajczyk, it was more than that. It was humiliation, and humiliation, in his mind, demanded revenge. So he left the courthouse. But he didn't go far. Witnesses later said that when he came back, he was almost unrecognizable, dressed in a black raincoat, dark sunglasses, a headband, and strangely a necklace of garlic cloves. It was theatrical, disturbing, a man dressed like death. Hidden in his backpack was a homemade bomb, and in his hand, a .45 caliber Colt pistol. He walked straight up to Vera Lemsik. She had no chance. He hugged her, then pulled the trigger. Gunshots echoed through the hallway. 2 women who had come to support her, gone in an instant. 2 others, struck down as they tried to flee. Screams filled the corridors. Then he pushed into the courtroom. Judge Alexander Szesesfer, just 33 years old, the man who had upheld the verdict, was his next target. One shot, then another. The judge collapsed. When his magazine ran dry, Mikolajczyk didn't stop. Instead, he reached for his backpack, and with one final violent act, he detonated the bomb. The explosion ripped through the room with horrifying force. Witnesses said the blast threw his body clear out a courtroom window. Some victims were so badly mutilated they couldn't even be identified at first. Blood soaked the courthouse floors. Survivors staggered out, dazed and trembling. 8 more people were injured, but somehow lived to tell the tale. Later, investigators combed through Mikolajczyk's apartment and found a disturbing cache. Chemicals used for making explosives. Proof that this wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This had been planned. For weeks, maybe months. His own brother had warned authorities a year earlier, told them Erwin was unstable, dangerous and abnormal, he'd said. But nothing had been done. No one listened. And now, 7 innocent people were dead. Among them was Vera's mother. Her lawyer later confirmed what many had feared. Vera had been nearly beaten unconscious by Mikolajczyk during their relationship. The signs were all there, but no one moved fast enough. This attack was not unpredictable, the lawyer said. It could have been prevented. Colleagues at the hospital where Mikolajczyk worked described him as a nobody, polite, reserved, invisible, but that invisibility had become his weapon. No one suspected what he was capable of until it was too late. In the end, the quiet man no one noticed became the face of one of Germany's deadliest courthouse massacres. 7 lives lost, 8 more shattered, a justice system caught off guard, and a town left with questions that would never be answered, because the man behind it all made sure he wouldn't be around to face them. On the night of November 24, 2009, 26-year-old medical student John Edward Jones descended into the Nutty Putty Cave with his brother and friends. He was home from Virginia, visiting family for the holiday, and it had been years since he'd last gone caving, a tradition he'd once enjoyed in his youth. The cave, with its twisting tunnels and narrow squeezes, was popular among Boy Scouts and thrill seekers. To many, it was a harmless challenge, but that night, for John, it would become a tomb. The group began their exploration around 8 p.m., maneuvering through a tight chute known as the Big Slide. As the thrill escalated, John, his brother, and 2 others veered off from the main party in search of a notorious passage called the Birth Canal, a tight, claustrophobic squeeze that had been navigated by many before. John went in head first through what he believed was the right tunnel. He sucked in his chest and pushed forward, inch by inch. But it wasn't the birth canal. It was a dead-end fissure, a terrifying 10 by 18-inch vertical crack about 400 feet from the entrance, angling sharply downward at 70 degrees. And John was now hopelessly stuck, wedged upside down, with the cold rock pressing against his body from all sides. At first, he didn't panic. He thought he could wiggle free. His younger brother tried desperately to pull at his legs, but the deeper reality quickly set in. John was trapped, swallowed by the cave. There was no turning back, no space to breathe, no room to shift his body, and worst of all, he was upside down, a position that the human body cannot tolerate for long without deadly consequences. Rescue crews were called. What followed was a desperate, round-the-clock operation involving more than 100 people. They crawled into that dark abyss with drills, pulleys, ropes, and hope. One of the first to reach him was Susie Motola, a petite caver who dropped everything to help. For 2 hours, she comforted John, trying to move him, reposition him, anything to buy time. One rescuer after another followed, working in rotating shifts, navigating the narrow hellscape just to get near him. To keep him fighting, they brought him a radio to speak with his wife. John tried to stay strong. He spoke about his kids, his faith, his will to survive. But gravity was not on his side. The blood pooling in his head, the organs shifting unnaturally, the suffocating compression. His body was slowly shutting down. After 19 grueling hours, the team built a pulley system and began to lift him. For a moment, it seemed hope was real. He moved slightly. The rope held. Then, in an instant, disaster. The system failed under the weight and strain. The rope snapped. John was slammed violently back into the hole. One rescuer was knocked unconscious by the recoil. When he came to, he told his father, another caver on site, "He's dying right now. He's got a heartbeat, but he's struggling to breathe." John's voice faded. His strength vanished. The last rescuer to reach him was Brandon Kowalis. By then, John was unresponsive. Brandon tried to check for vitals, struggling to steady his shaking hands while jammed between the cold, sharp rock. He listened with a stethoscope. Nothing. He reached for a pulse. Silence. A paramedic followed and confirmed what everyone feared. John Edward Jones was gone. But the tragedy didn't end there. His body, still wedged in the rock, was unrecoverable. The risk was too great, the passage too narrow. There was no way to bring him out without endangering more lives. In a quiet, heart-wrenching decision, the family agreed. The cave would become his final resting place. Explosives were used to collapse the chamber around his body. Concrete sealed every entrance. Nutty Putty Cave was closed forever, not just as a safety measure, but as a grave.
The Fulton County Courthouse cordoned off as deputies with guns drawn searched for 33-year-old Brian Nichols. He's accused of stealing a deputy's gun.
It was a Friday morning like any other at the Fulton County Courthouse in downtown Atlanta. Judges in black robes were taking their seats, clerks sorting paperwork, jurors whispering behind heavy doors. No one could have imagined the bloodshed that was about to erupt inside one of the most secure courtrooms in Georgia. Judge Roland Barnes, a man known for his calm demeanor, sharp intellect, and fair judgment, had just begun another day on the bench. At 64, he had handled countless criminal cases, from drug offenses to homicide. But nothing would prepare him, or anyone else, for what was coming. Brian Nichols was in custody, facing serious charges: rape, sodomy, gun possession, and drug trafficking. He was no stranger to violence, and on this day, something in him snapped. As he was being escorted into the courtroom, Nichols made his move. In one swift and brutal moment, he overpowered a female sheriff's deputy, wrestled her gun away, and turned it on the very heart of justice. The first shots rang out just after 9 a.m. Panic surged through the building as Judge Barnes was gunned down in his own courtroom. A man known for his patience, for giving even the worst defendants a fair hearing, was executed in cold blood before he could even react. Beside him, his court reporter, Julie Brandow, was also shot and killed. The courtroom, once a place of order and due process, had been turned into a war zone. Nichols wasn't done. Outside the courtroom, he shot and killed a deputy on a nearby street corner. Another deputy was wounded. Then, as chaos erupted and sirens began to echo through the city, Nichols disappeared, blending into the streets of Atlanta by carjacking a local journalist, Don O'Brien. The reporter had been beaten and left behind while Nichols vanished into the city with a stolen green Honda Accord. Downtown Atlanta went into total lockdown. Every building, every hallway, every alley was searched. Helicopters hovered overhead. Officers from multiple agencies poured into the streets, desperate to find the man who had turned one of the state's highest courts into a killing ground. The entire city held its breath. Inside the courthouse, stunned silence reigned. Judges locked themselves in their chambers. Lawyers stared blankly at one another. Some had heard the gunshots. Others had only seen the aftermath: blood on the floor, the broken bodies of colleagues, the flashing lights of dozens of police cars outside. A courthouse designed to uphold justice had become a crime scene. As the news broke, so did the illusion of safety that so many believed the justice system could guarantee. And Judge Roland Barnes, once a respected figure behind the bench who just weeks earlier had made headlines for ordering a controversial medical procedure to prevent a convicted mother from having more children, was now a national headline himself for the most horrifying reason imaginable. This wasn't just an attack on a judge, it was an assault on the very fabric of the legal system. A judge, a court reporter, a deputy, gone in seconds. Authorities found Nichols the following day, hiding in an apartment complex in Duluth, Georgia. The manhunt was over, but the scars he left behind were permanent. What haunted people most wasn't just the violence, but how easily it happened. In a building designed for law and order, a single lapse, a single moment of vulnerability, had allowed a man with nothing to lose to take everything from those who swore to uphold the law. And in the wake of the massacre, fear crept into courtrooms across the nation. Judges wondered if they were safe. Bailiffs tightened security. Families asked why Nichols wasn't restrained more securely. Why wasn't he stopped? No answer could bring back Judge Barnes or Julie Brandow or the deputy who died outside that day. Judge Barnes had been more than a legal figure. He was a man who listened, who believed in second chances, who brought a sense of calm into a building filled with conflict, and he died doing his duty, a symbol of justice cut down not by a legal ruling, but by a bullet. The echoes of that day still linger in Fulton County, in hushed conversations, in courthouse hallways, in the memory of every juror who once looked Nichols in the eye, and in the shadow of a tragedy that reminded the nation how fragile safety can be, even in the places built to protect it.